Zekthal pressed his face against the cold metal of his ship's viewing port and stared at the distant human mining station. The structure looked primitive, almost crude compared to the elegant designs of the galactic hegemony. Metal beams held together what appeared to be salvaged parts from a dozen different ships. The humans had built their station like children playing with blocks. He adjusted his scanner and recorded another data entry. The hegemony command wanted to know how much the humans could extract from this asteroid field. The answer was disappointing. Their mining equipment was slow and inefficient. Their ships were basic metal boxes with engines attached. Zekthal had been watching them for 3 days, and nothing impressed him. The young Rex officer touched his crystalline blue skin, where it had started to itch from the dry air in his scout ship. His compound eyes could see in multiple directions at once, giving him a perfect view of the human operation. Everything about them seemed weak and limited. They lived such short lives that they barely had time to learn anything useful. The hegemony had been right to dismiss them as unimportant. Zekthal pulled up the mission briefing on his screen. Observe human mining capabilities. Record resource extraction rates. Do not make contact. Return with data in 1 week. Simple work for a junior officer like himself. His superiors probably gave him this assignment because it was so boring that nobody else wanted it. A soft beeping sound made him look at his instruments. Something was wrong. The cloaking device that kept his ship invisible was flickering. Zekthal ran his fingers over the control panel, trying to stabilize the system. The beeping grew louder. Not now, he whispered in his own language. The cloaking device had worked perfectly for months. Why would it fail during such an easy mission? The answer came in the form of a human patrol ship that appeared on his scanner. The vessel was smaller than his scout ship, but moving fast. Too fast. Zekthal watched in growing alarm as the human ship changed course and headed straight toward his position. They had detected him. Zekthal's training kicked in. He powered up his engines and prepared to jump to hyperspace. One quick escape, and the humans would never know what they had almost found. His fingers moved across the controls with practiced skill. Nothing happened. The engines were dead. Cloaking device failure had somehow damaged the power systems. Zekthal stared at his instruments in disbelief. This was impossible. Vrex technology was supposed to be superior to anything the humans possessed. The human patrol ship was getting closer. Zekthal could see it clearly now through his viewing port. It looked like a metal box with weapons attached to the sides. The humans had painted words on the hull in their primitive language. He activated his translator and read the name, Frontier Dawn. A voice crackled through his communication system. The humans were trying to talk to him. Unknown vessel, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the Frontier Dawn. You are in violation of colony space. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Zekthal almost laughed. These primitives wanted to board a hegemony ship? They had no idea what they were dealing with. Even damaged, his scout ship carried weapons that could destroy their entire patrol vessel. He reached for the firing controls. Then he stopped. His mission was to observe, not start a war. If he destroyed a human ship, the hegemony would have to explain the incident to the Galactic Council. There would be investigations and reports, and probably a court-martial for the junior officer who had caused the mess. Unknown vessel, you have 30 seconds to respond, the human captain said. His voice sounded calm, almost bored. Zekthal made his decision. He would surrender, let the humans examine his ship, and then escape when they realized they were out of their depth. The hegemony would retrieve him, and this would become an amusing story to tell other officers. This is Scout Vessel 779, he said, speaking slowly so the human translator could understand him. I am having technical difficulties. I mean no harm. Copy that. Maintain position and keep your weapons powered down. We're coming alongside." Zekthal watched through his viewing port as the human ship approached. He could see figures moving behind small windows in the hull. They looked so small and fragile compared to his own people. The Vreks were taller, stronger, and lived 3 times as long as humans. How could such weak creatures pose any threat? The answer came when the human ship attached itself to his hull with a loud clang. Zekthal heard cutting sounds as the humans began to slice through his outer door. They worked with surprising speed and skill. Within minutes, they had created an opening large enough to enter his ship. The first human through the hole was Captain Morrison. He was shorter than Zekthal, but moved with the confidence of a trained soldier. Behind him came 3 more humans, all carrying weapons and wearing what looked like makeshift armor. One of them was a woman with short brown hair and quick, intelligent eyes. "Well, well," Captain Morrison said, looking around Zekthal's ship. "This is definitely not human technology." The woman stepped forward and began examining the control panels. "Captain, look at this. These systems are decades ahead of anything we have. Maybe centuries." "Lisa, can you figure out how it works?" Morrison asked. The woman named Lisa ran her hands over the alien controls. "Give me a few minutes. The design is completely different, but the basic principles should be the same." Zekthal watched in amazement as the human engineer began to understand his ship's systems. She worked without tools, using only her eyes and hands to trace the connections between different components. Within minutes, she had identified the main power systems and the navigation controls. "This is impossible," Zekthal said. "Your people do not have the knowledge to understand Vrex technology." Lisa looked up at him with a smile. "Maybe not, but I grew up fixing broken mining equipment with spare parts and hope. Same principles apply." Morrison kept his weapon pointed at Zekthal, but didn't seem nervous or afraid. "What's your name, alien?" "I am Zekthiel of the Galactic Hegemony. I demand to speak with your government." "You're not in a position to demand anything," Morrison said, "but I'll be happy to arrange that conversation. Right after we make sure you're not here to cause trouble." Zekthal felt a chill of fear. These humans were not reacting the way they should. They should be frightened or confused by their first contact with an alien species. Instead, they were treating him like a common criminal they had caught sneaking around their territory. "You do not understand," Zekthal said. "I represent a civilization that spans hundreds of worlds. We have weapons that could destroy your entire planet." Morrison nodded. "Probably. But right now, you're on my ship, in my space, with a broken engine and no way to call for help. So let's focus on the current situation." Lisa had connected some kind of device to his control panel. "Captain, I think I can get his engines working again, but it's going to take some time." "Why would you help me?" Zekthal asked. "Because," Morrison said, "despite what you might think about us primitive humans, we're not in the habit of leaving people stranded in space, even uninvited guests." Zekthal stared at the human captain. This was completely wrong. The hegemony briefings had described humans as violent and unpredictable. They were supposed to shoot first and ask questions later. Instead, they were offering to help repair his ship. "I do not understand your species," Zekthal admitted. Morrison smiled. "Join the club. We don't understand ourselves half the time." While Lisa worked on his engines, the other humans explored his ship with curious but respectful hands. They asked questions about everything they saw, but didn't try to steal anything or damage his equipment. One of them even offered Zekthal some water when he noticed the alien looked uncomfortable. After 2 hours, Lisa announced that the engines were repaired. "You should be able to make it back to wherever you came from," she said. "But I'd recommend having a real mechanic look at your cloaking device. The power coupling is unstable." Zekthal felt confused and somehow disappointed as the humans prepared to leave his ship. "That is all? You are just going to let me go? Should we do something else?" Morrison asked. "I was spying on your people. In my culture, that would be considered an act of war." Morrison shrugged. "Maybe, but you didn't hurt anyone, and you seem to be having a bad enough day already. Besides, we're curious about your people too. Maybe next time we can arrange a proper meeting instead of accidentally running into each other." The humans returned to their ship and detached from his hull. Zekthal watched them move away and felt something he had never experienced before. The humans had shown him mercy when they could have taken him prisoner. They had helped him when they could have left him stranded. They had treated him with respect when they could have treated him as an enemy. He powered up his engines and set course for the hegemony fleet. But as he flew away from the human mining station, Zekthal found himself thinking about Captain Morrison's words. Maybe next time they could arrange a proper meeting. The young Grex officer had no way of knowing that his distress beacon had been transmitting for the past 3 hours, or that a hegemony battle fleet was already moving toward human space. He had no idea that his simple reconnaissance mission was about to start the first war between humans and the galactic hegemony. Zekthal stood in the command center of the hegemony battleship Eternal Victory and watched the green planet grow larger on the main screen. New Harmony looked peaceful from orbit. He could see vast fields of crops, small cities connected by roads, and ships moving slowly between the settlements. It was exactly the kind of soft target that Admiral Kenthiver preferred for his demonstrations. 2.3 million humans, the Admiral said, reading from his tactical display. Most of them farmers and factory workers. No military installations, no orbital defenses. This will be over in hours. Zekthal felt uncomfortable. He had tried to tell the Admiral about his encounter with Captain Morrison and the crew of the Frontier Dawn. He had explained how the humans showed unexpected intelligence and mercy. But Admiral Kenthiver had dismissed his report as the confused observations of a junior officer who had been frightened by his first contact with aliens. "Admiral," Zekthal said carefully, "perhaps we should try to communicate with them first. They may be willing to negotiate." The Admiral's 4 eyes turned toward him with obvious annoyance. "Junior Officer Zekthal, you will observe and learn. These humans kidnapped you and damaged your ship. They must be punished for their crimes against the hegemony." Zekthal wanted to explain that the humans had actually helped him, but he knew. The Admiral would not listen. The old soldier had made up his mind. 200 hegemony warships against a farming planet. It would be a massacre. The attack began at dawn on New Harmony. Zekthal watched the first wave of landing ships descend toward the main settlement. Each ship carried 50 hegemony soldiers equipped with advanced weapons and armor. Against farmers and shopkeepers, they should have been unstoppable. The first sign that something was wrong came when the lead landing ship exploded in a ball of fire. Then another, and another. Zekthal stared at the screen in shock as primitive surface-to-air. Missiles rose from hidden positions around the settlement. The humans had been ready for them. "Impossible," Admiral Kenthiver said. "Our intelligence showed no military defenses." "Sir," called the communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface." "Put it on the main screen." The Admiral ordered. The face that appeared was that of a middle-aged human with gray hair and tired eyes. He wore simple clothes and looked more like a teacher than a soldier. But when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "This is Colony Administrator Ben Hughes speaking for the people of New Harmony. You have entered our space without permission and attacked our homes. We demand that you withdraw immediately." Admiral Kenthiver laughed. "You demand? Human, you are surrounded by 200 warships. You have no choice but to surrender." Ben Hughes looked directly at the Admiral with calm, steady eyes. "We always have a choice, and we choose to fight." The transmission ended. Within minutes, Zekthal watched something that changed his understanding of human nature forever. The peaceful farming colony transformed into a fortress. Tractors emerged from barns with armor plating welded to their sides and weapons mounted on top. Irrigation ditches became defensive trenches. Grain silos opened to reveal missile launchers. How did they hide all this? Zekthal whispered. "They didn't hide it," said Commander Velanash, the ship's tactical officer. "They built it. Look at the sensor readings. Those weapons are made from farming equipment. They're improvising everything." The second wave of landing ships faced a completely different battle. The humans had turned their entire settlement into a maze of defensive positions. Every building was a bunker. Every street was a killing ground. The hegemony soldiers found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. Zekthal watched the battle feeds with growing amazement. A human woman in a mechanic's coveralls destroyed a hegemony tank by throwing an explosive device under its tracks, then disappeared into a drainage tunnel. An old man with a walking stick coordinated defensive fire from a position that should have been impossible to reach. Children who should have been in school ran messages between fighting positions while dodging laser fire. The real shock came when he saw the human military response. A small unit of soldiers, led by a young woman with lieutenant's insignia, had taken position at the town's main crossroads. There were maybe 30 of them against 3,000 hegemony troops. By every rule of warfare, they should have been overrun in minutes. Instead, they held for 6 hours. Lieutenant Amy Stone, according to the intercepted communications, turned every building into a fortress and every doorway into an ambush point. Her soldiers moved through the buildings like ghosts, appearing to attack, and then vanishing before the hegemony forces could respond. They used the humans' knowledge of their own town against the invaders, leading them into traps and dead ends. "This is not how primitives fight," Admiral Kenthaver said, staring at the tactical display. "They're using advanced tactics." "No, sir," Commander Velanash replied. "They're using desperation, and it's working." The breakthrough came when the hegemony forces finally concentrated their entire assault on the central position. The humans fought to their last bullet, their last grenade, their last breath. When the smoke cleared, the hegemony had taken the crossroads. But they had paid a terrible price for a small piece of ground. Zekthal expected to find the human defenders dead or captured. Instead, the hegemony soldiers found empty buildings and abandoned positions. Somehow, most of the humans had escaped. "Underground tunnels," reported the ground commander. "They've been digging for years. The entire settlement is connected by passages we never detected. Find them," Admiral Kenthaver ordered. "Find them and destroy them." But the humans were already gone. The tunnels led to the forests and hills around the settlement. The civilians had been evacuated hours ago. The soldiers had bought them time with their lives and then escaped to fight another day. What disturbed Zekthal most was not the tactical brilliance of the human defense. It was the willingness of ordinary people to fight and die for their homes. He had watched farmers pick up weapons and face trained soldiers without hesitation. He had seen children risk their lives to help wounded defenders. He had witnessed an entire community choose death over surrender. The final shock came when the hegemony forces occupied the abandoned settlement. The humans had left behind booby traps in every building. Not random explosions, but carefully planned. Devices designed to kill anyone who tried to loot or destroy human property. Even in defeat, they were still fighting. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving multiple distress signals from our other fleets." Admiral Kenthaver turned from the tactical display. "What other fleets?" "The attacks on the mining stations, sir. The raids on our supply convoys. The humans are hitting us everywhere at once. Zekthal felt a chill run through his crystalline skin. While the hegemony had been focused on crushing one farming planet, the humans had been planning something much larger. The attack on New Harmony had not been their desperate last stand. It had been a distraction. How many ships have we lost? The Admiral asked quietly. 17 so far, sir. And the numbers are growing. Admiral Kenthe stared at the main screen, where the green planet of New Harmony continued to orbit peacefully. The human settlement was in ruins, but somehow the Admiral did not look like a victor. He looked like someone who had just realized he had made a terrible mistake. Junior Officer Zekthal, the Admiral said without turning around, prepare a detailed report on human combat capabilities. I want to know everything about how they fight. Yes, sir, Zekthal replied. But as he left the command center, he wondered if any report could really explain what he had witnessed. The humans had not just fought well. They had fought like they had nothing to lose and everything to gain. They had turned their weakness into strength and their desperation into strategy. Most disturbing of all, they had enjoyed it. In the intercepted communications, he had heard humans laughing as they fought impossible odds. They had joked with each other while facing death. They had treated the most serious battle of their lives like some kind of deadly game. Zekthal began to understand that the hegemony had not attacked a primitive species. They had awakened something that had been sleeping. And now that it was awake, he was not sure anyone could put it back to sleep. The young Rex officer returned to his quarters and began writing his report. But the words that kept appearing on his screen were not tactical assessments or strategic recommendations. They were a single, repeated phrase that he could not get out of his mind. What have we done? What have we done? What have we done? Zekthal had been transferred to 5 different commanders in 2 months. Each time, his new superior wanted him to explain how humans fought. Each time, he tried to warn them that the enemy was unlike anything they had faced before. And each time, they learned the truth too late. He stood now on the bridge of the Crimson Blade, watching another battle that should have been impossible. The ice world of Titan's Rest stretched below them, a frozen wasteland where nothing should be able to survive. A hegemony had built a fortress there, believing the harsh climate would protect them from human attack. They had been wrong. Commander Pete Rodriguez was leading 2,000 human soldiers up a mountain in the middle of a blizzard. The temperature was 40 degrees below freezing. The wind was strong enough to knock a grown Rex off his feet. Visibility was almost zero. And somehow, the humans were not just surviving the conditions. They were using them. How are they maintaining formation in this weather? Asked General Thekmer, the fortress commander. Our own troops can barely see 10 feet in front of them. Zekthal studied the tactical display. The humans moved in small groups, appearing and disappearing in the snow like ghosts. They seemed to know exactly where they were going, despite the storm. They are not using electronic communication, Zekthal observed. Look at the energy signatures. No radio transmissions, no data signals. Then how are they coordinating their attack? I do not know, Zekthal admitted. But he was beginning to suspect that humans had ways of working together that the hegemony did not understand. The answer came when the first human assault teams reached the fortress walls. They moved with perfect timing, hitting 12 different positions at exactly the same moment. The hegemony defenders fired down at them, but the humans seemed to vanish into the snow before the energy beams could find their targets. Sir, called the communications officer, the perimeter teams are requesting reinforcements. The humans are everywhere. General Thekmer activated his personal communicator. All units, fall back to secondary positions. Use the prepared kill zones. But the kill zones were empty. The humans had somehow avoided every trap and defensive position the hegemony had prepared. They appeared inside the fortress before anyone understood how they had gotten past the walls. Zekthal watched Commander Rodriguez lead his troops through the fortress corridors. The human commander moved like he had been born in this frozen wasteland. His soldiers followed him with absolute confidence, trusting him to lead them through an environment that should have killed them all. 16 hours, Zekthal said quietly. What? General Vekmer demanded. They have been fighting for 16 hours without rest, in conditions that would kill most species in minutes. And they are still attacking. The general stared at the tactical display. The humans had been climbing the mountain since before dawn. They had fought through 3 defensive lines. They had survived temperatures that froze water solid. And they showed no signs of slowing down. The fortress fell in 4 hours. When the smoke cleared, General Vekmer found himself a prisoner in his own command center. Commander Rodriguez stood before him, breathing hard, but still alert. His uniform was torn and frozen, but his eyes were bright with victory. How? The general asked. How did you coordinate your attack without communications? Rodriguez smiled. We grew up in places like this. Ice worlds, desert planets, jungle moons. When you live in hell, you learn to work together or you die. But the cold, the wind, how did you survive? Same way we always do, Rodriguez said. We refused to quit. Zekthal was transferred again 3 days later. His new assignment was aboard the Void Hunter, a deep space patrol ship hunting human raiders. Captain Velkith believed that space combat would be different. In the vacuum between stars, primitive human ships would be no match for advanced hegemony technology. The first engagement proved him wrong. Rachel Brooks was flying a human fighter. That looked like it had been built from spare parts in someone's garage. Her ship was smaller than the hegemony's scout vessel and carried weapons that should have been useless against military armor. She was facing 3 hegemony interceptors, each one faster and more heavily armed than her own craft. She destroyed all 3 in less than 2 minutes. Zekthal watched the battle recording over and over, trying to understand what he had seen. The human pilot had not followed any standard combat patterns. She had not tried to outrun the enemy ships or engage them at maximum range. Instead, she had flown straight into the middle of their formation and started shooting. Look at her flight path, Captain Velkith said, pointing at the tactical display. She should have been torn apart in seconds. No pilot flies like that and survives. Unless they are not trying to survive, Zekthal said. Unless they are trying to win. The recording showed Rachel Brooks pulling maneuvers that should have killed her. She flew her ship like it was part of her body, spinning and diving and accelerating in ways that defied physics. When her weapons ran out of ammunition, she rammed the 4th enemy ship and somehow ejected at the last second. She used her ship as a weapon, Zekthal whispered. Even when she had no ammunition left, she found a way to keep fighting. Captain Velkith stared at the screen. What kind of species trains their pilots to die for victory? Zekthal had begun asking captured human soldiers that same question. Between battles, he was allowed to interview prisoners of war. What he learned disturbed him more than any military defeat. Sergeant Danny Pierce had been captured after holding a supply depot for 3 days against impossible odds. He sat across from Zekthal in the prison interview room, his left arm in a sling and his face covered with bandages. But his eyes were clear and unafraid. Why did you not retreat? Zekthal asked. You could have escaped before we surrounded the depot. Couldn't do that, Pierce said simply. My orders were to hold the line. But you knew you would be captured or killed. Probably. But that wasn't really the point. Zekthal leaned forward. Then what was the point? Pierce was quiet for a long moment. You ever hear the story about the 300 Spartans at Thermopylae? No. Ancient human battle. 300 soldiers held a mountain pass against an army of hundreds of thousands. They all died, but they bought time for their people too. Prepare for war. They knew they were going to die, and they fought anyway. That sounds like madness. Pierce smiled. Maybe, but it's also who we are. When someone needs to hold the line, we hold it. When someone needs to buy time, we buy it, even if it costs us everything. Another prisoner, Medic Claire Turner, showed Zekthal pictures of her family while she treated wounded hegemony soldiers. She worked on enemy prisoners with the same care she gave to human casualties. When Zekthal asked her why, she looked at him like the question made no sense. They're hurt, she said. That's all that matters. But they are your enemies. Right now, they're patients. I took an oath to help people, not to judge them. Zekthal watched her work. She had lost her left leg in the battle where she was captured. She could barely walk. But she insisted on treating every wounded prisoner personally, dragging herself from bed to bed with determination that amazed the hegemony medical staff. Do all humans think like this? He asked her, think like what? That duty matters more than personal survival. Turner considered the question carefully. Not all of us, but enough. We have a saying, some people run toward danger when everyone else runs away. Those are the people who become soldiers and doctors and teachers and parents. They're the ones who hold civilization together. That night, Zekthal began writing in a private journal, not an official report, but his own thoughts about what he was witnessing. The humans were not just fighting a war. They were expressing something fundamental about their nature. They fought hardest when things looked hopeless. They worked together without being ordered to cooperate. They treated enemies with mercy and friends with loyalty. They never seemed to consider giving up, even when victory was impossible. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to be getting stronger as the war continued. Each battle taught them something new. Each defeat showed them a better way to fight. They were learning from every encounter and adapting faster than the hegemony could respond. Zekthal wrote in his journal, "We thought we were fighting a primitive species, but I begin to suspect that we have awakened something that was only pretending to be primitive. The humans are not what they appear to be. They are something else entirely. Something that grows stronger under pressure and fights harder when cornered." He paused and then added, "I think we have made a terrible mistake, and I do not know how to fix it." Outside his quarters, the war continued. But Zekthal was beginning to understand that this was not really a war between two species. It was a test, and he was no longer sure which side was being tested. Zekthal stood on the command deck of the Supreme flagship and watched 500 hegemony warships surround the fortress world of Kepler Prime. This was the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. 3 million soldiers waited in the landing bays. Weapons capable of cracking planets charged their power cores. The assembled firepower could have conquered a dozen star systems. It should have been the end of the war. Supreme Commander Veltar gestured toward the massive planet. On the main screen, Kepler Prime was a ball of metal and concrete, covered with defensive installations and military bases. Every surface bristled with weapons. Underground bunkers connected by tunnels that ran for thousands of miles. It was the strongest fortress humanity had ever built. "Today, we end this madness," Veltar announced to his fleet commanders. "The humans have gathered their remaining forces on one world. We will crush them here and bring peace to the galaxy." Zekthal watched the tactical displays and felt a familiar chill of worry. The humans had been losing ground for months, retreating to stronger and stronger positions. Every military expert agreed that Kepler Prime would be their final stand. But something about the situation felt wrong to him. "Sir," Zekthal said carefully, Perhaps we should consider why the humans chose this world for their last battle. Because they have nowhere else to run, Veltar replied. They are trapped. Junior officer, and trapped animals are easily killed. The assault began at dawn across 12 time zones. Hegemony ships bombarded the planet's surface, while landing craft descended toward the fortress cities. The first wave of attacks went exactly as planned. Human orbital defenses fell silent. Landing zones were secured. Ground forces began there. Advance toward the main fortress complex. Zekthal monitored the communications from the surface. General Frank Hayes was commanding the human defense from deep inside the fortress. His transmissions were calm and professional, as if he were conducting a training exercise instead of fighting for the survival of his species. All units, this is Hayes. Execute Protocol 7. The words meant nothing to Zekthal, but he watched. The tactical officer's face grew pale as new signals appeared on the scanner displays. Sir, the tactical officer reported, we're receiving distress calls from our bases in the Centauri system. What kind of distress calls? Veltar demanded. Coordinated. Attacks, sir. Human forces are hitting our supply depots, communication centers, and command posts, all at the same time. More reports flooded in. The hegemony base at Wolf 359 was under attack. The shipyards at Vega were burning. Supply convoys throughout. The sector were being ambushed by human raiders who seemed to know exactly where to find them. Zekthal felt his crystalline skin grow cold as he realized what had happened. While the hegemony had been gathering their forces for one massive attack, the humans had been planning something completely different. Kepler Prime was not their last desperate stand. It was bait for a trap that spanned dozens of star systems. How? Are they coordinating these attacks? Veltar asked. Our intelligence reports that most of their fleet is here, defending this world. Sir, the communications officer called out, we're intercepting human military transmissions. They're using our own communication networks against us. On the main screen, a new tactical display showed the scope of the human offensive. Red symbols marked hegemony positions under attack across 3 sectors. The humans had not just launched raids. They had planned a coordinated strike that was dismantling the hegemony's entire rear support structure. Impossible, Veltar whispered. They don't have enough ships to attack this many targets. They don't need big ships, sir, Zekthal said, studying the attack patterns. Look at the targets. They're hitting fuel depots, supply warehouses, communication arrays. Small targets that can be destroyed by fast attack craft. The truth was even worse than Zekthal had imagined. The humans had been studying hegemony logistics for months, learning exactly how their enemy's supply system worked. Every fuel depot, every spare parts warehouse, every communication relay had been mapped and targeted. While the hegemony concentrated their forces at Kepler Prime, the humans cut their supply lines across the galaxy. On the planet's surface, the siege was becoming a nightmare. Colonel Nancy White commanded the underground bunker complex beneath the main fortress. Her forces had turned the tunnel system into a maze of death traps and ambush points. Hegemony troops found themselves fighting in narrow corridors, where their superior numbers meant nothing. Zekthal watched the battle feeds in amazement. The humans had prepared for this siege for years. Every tunnel had multiple escape routes. Every chamber could be sealed off and defended independently. The fortress was not one building, but thousands of connected positions, each one designed to be held by a small force against overwhelming odds. Sir, reported the ground commander, we've taken the outer perimeter, but the defenders have fallen. Back to secondary positions. Every meter of tunnel is defended. How many casualties? Veltar asked. Heavy, sir. The humans are using the tunnels like a weapon. They attack from hidden positions and then disappear before we can respond. The real shock came when Captain Rick Ford, led a desperate sortie from one of the fortress hangar bays. His squadron of 30 human fighters launched directly into the middle of the hegemony fleet. It should have been suicide. Instead, it became something that changed the entire war. Ford's target was not the main fleet, but a single command ship that had moved too close to the planet's surface. The humans flew through defensive fire that should have destroyed them all. Half of Ford's squadron was shot down in the first minute. The survivors kept flying. When Ford's fighter rammed the command ship's bridge, Zekthal expected the mission to end in failure. The humans had traded 30 ships and pilots for one enemy vessel. By any reasonable calculation, it was a losing exchange, but the humans had not been trying to destroy the ship. They had been trying to capture it. Within hours, human technicians had cracked the command ship's computer systems. The vessel contained detailed information about hegemony fleet positions, supply schedules, and communication codes. Information that the humans immediately used to coordinate attacks across 3 star systems. They planned this, Zekthal said in wonder. The entire sortie was designed to capture that one ship. One ship, Veltar repeated. They sacrificed 30 pilots to steal one ship. No, sir, Zekthal replied. They sacrificed 30 pilots to win the war. The captured intelligence allowed the humans to strike with devastating precision. Hegemony supply convoys found themselves ambushed by raiders who knew their exact routes and schedules. Communication centers went dark, just as reinforcement fleets arrived to defend them. Fuel depots exploded minutes before hegemony ships arrived to refuel, but the most disturbing development was happening on Kepler Prime itself. Despite suffering heavy casualties, the human defenders were not weakening. If anything, they seemed to be fighting harder as the battle continued. Each lost position became a lesson in how to defend the next one. Each failed attack taught them new ways to hurt their enemies. Zekthal watched Colonel White coordinate the tunnel defenses and realized something that terrified him. The humans were not just trying to survive the siege. They were using it as a training exercise. Every battle was making them better at war. Sir, the tactical officer reported, our fuel reserves are at 30%. The attacks on our supply lines are preventing resupply. And ammunition? Veltar asked. 40% and falling. The humans have destroyed 6 of our main supply depots. Zekthal looked at the tactical displays showing hegemony forces across the galaxy. Red warning symbols marked fuel shortages, ammunition shortages, and communication failures. The mighty fleet surrounding Kepler Prime was slowly starving to death. How long can we maintain the siege? Veltar asked quietly. At current consumption rates, perhaps 2 weeks, the logistics officer replied, unless we can reopen our supply lines. And the humans? Unknown, sir. Their supply requirements appear to be much lower than ours, and they're getting reinforcements through the tunnel systems. Zekthal stared at the fortress world on the main screen. The humans had turned their last desperate stand into a strategic masterpiece. They had drawn the entire hegemony fleet into a trap that was slowly crushing their enemy's ability to wage war. But the most frightening part was not their tactical brilliance. It was their absolute refusal to consider surrender. Even when facing impossible odds, even when surrounded by overwhelming force, the humans kept fighting. They treated every setback as a temporary problem and every defeat as a learning opportunity. Sir, Zekthal said carefully, I request permission to analyze the human strategic approach. For what purpose? To understand how they think, sir. If we're going to defeat them, we need to know how their minds work. Veltar nodded grimly. Do it. Because I'm beginning to think we've seriously underestimated these creatures. As Zekthal left the command center, he wondered if it was already too late for understanding. The humans had not just outfought the hegemony. They had outthought them. And now, trapped on their fortress world with nowhere to run, They were, still finding ways to win. That night, Zekthal wrote in his journal, "The humans are not fighting to survive. They are fighting to teach us that we cannot defeat them." Zekthal stood on the observation deck of the diplomatic transport ship and watched Earth grow larger in the viewport. 6 months had passed since the failed siege of Kepler Prime. 6 months since the hegemony fleet had been forced to withdraw from human space with their supply lines cut and their forces scattered. The war was over, but not in the way anyone had expected. The planet below looked nothing like the primitive world described in the old hegemony files. Massive orbital stations surrounded Earth like a protective shell. Ships moved between them in carefully organized patterns. The energy signatures showed technology that rivaled anything the hegemony possessed. How did they advance so quickly? Asked Ambassador Thekino, who had been sent to negotiate the peace treaty. Zekthal studied the scanner readings. "They learned from us. Every captured ship, every piece of equipment we left behind, every battle we fought against them. They studied it all and made it better." The truth was even more impressive than that. The humans had not just copied hegemony technology. They had improved it. The orbital defense platforms used power systems more efficient than anything the hegemony had ever built. The ships moved with engines that produced more thrust using less fuel. Even the communication arrays were upgraded versions of captured hegemony designs. In 6 months, Zekthal continued, they have accomplished what should have taken decades. The shuttle that came to meet them was clearly of human design, but it incorporated elements from a dozen different alien technologies. The pilot who greeted them was a young woman with confident eyes and a friendly smile. "Welcome to Earth," she said in perfect hegemony standard language. "I'm Lieutenant Sarah Kim. President Mitchell is waiting to meet with you." The flight to the surface took them over cities that amazed Zekthal with their organization and efficiency. Human settlements had always been chaotic and unplanned compared to hegemony standards. But these cities showed clear evidence of rapid but thoughtful growth. New buildings rose alongside old ones in patterns that somehow made sense. "Your people have been busy," Ambassador Thekino observed. Lieutenant Kim smiled. "We learned a lot during the war. About ourselves, about technology, about what we're capable of when we really try." President Karen Mitchell met them in a conference room that overlooked the rebuilt capital city. She was a middle-aged woman with engineers' hands and politicians' eyes. Behind her stood advisors and translators, but Zekthal noticed something unusual. Half of them were young people, some barely out of their teens. "Thank you for coming," President Mitchell said. "I know this isn't easy for any of us." Ambassador Thekino nodded formally. "The Galactic Hegemony wishes to discuss terms for ending hostilities between our peoples." "Good," Mitchell replied, "because we have a lot to talk about." She activated a holographic display that showed the current state of human space. What Zekthal saw made his compound eyes widen in shock. In 6 months, humanity had expanded their territory by 40%. New colonies dotted star systems that had been empty before the war. Mining operations extracted resources from asteroids with efficiency that impressed even hegemony engineers. How? Zekthal asked before he could stop himself. President Mitchell looked at him with interest. "You're the officer who wrote the reports about human psychology, aren't you? Your observations were quite accurate. You read my reports? We captured several hegemony data cores during the war. Your analysis helped us understand how we appeared to your people. It was very useful." Zekthal felt a chill. The humans had been studying their enemies just as carefully as they had been studied themselves. "To answer your question," Mitchell continued, "we expanded because we had to. The war taught us that staying in one place makes you vulnerable, so we spread out. We built new colonies, new shipyards, new defensive positions. And we did it fast, because we finally understood that we couldn't wait for someone else to protect. U.S. She gestured to the young advisors around the table. These are the war generation. Kids who grew up during the fighting and learned lessons that we adults took decades to understand. They think differently than we do, better in many ways. One of the young advisors, a woman barely 20 years old, activated another display. The war changed how we approach everything. Education, technology, expansion, defense. We learned that being peaceful doesn't mean being helpless. Ambassador Decanol studied the displays. A hegemony is prepared to offer a formal peace treaty, mutual recognition of borders, trade agreements, cultural exchange programs. That's a good start, Mitchell said. But we need to talk about something more important than borders. She stood and walked to the window overlooking the city. Do you know what we learned about ourselves during this war? We learned that we're not the peaceful farmers and merchants that we pretended to be. We're something else entirely. Zekthal leaned forward. What do you mean? We're survivors, Mitchell said simply. For millions of years, we lived on a world that tried to kill us every day. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, plagues, predators. We survived all of it by learning to adapt, to cooperate, to never give up no matter how bad things got. She turned back to face the alien delegation. We thought civilization had changed us. We thought we had become soft and comfortable. The war proved us wrong. Underneath all our technology and culture, we're still the same species that walked out of Africa and conquered an entire planet with nothing but sharp sticks and stubborn determination. And that frightens you? Ambassador Decanal asked. It should frighten everyone, Mitchell replied, including us. She activated a final display that showed human expansion projections. The numbers were staggering. Within 10 years, humanity would have colonies in 50 star systems. Within 20 years, they would match the hegemony's industrial capacity. Within 50 years, they would surpass it. This is what happens when humans stop holding back, Mitchell explained. We spent centuries trying to be civilized and peaceful. But civilization and peace are luxuries we can afford only when we feel safe. When someone threatens us, we remember what we really are. Zekthal stared at the projections. You are showing us this as a threat? No, Mitchell said. We're showing you this as a promise. We will never be victims again. We will never trust our survival to the goodwill of others. We will become strong enough to protect ourselves and our allies from any threat. And if the hegemony tries to attack you again? The young advisor who had shown the expansion data smiled. We won't just defend ourselves. We'll make sure the attack never happens again. Ambassador Decanol was quiet for a long moment. What do you want from us? Partnership, Mitchell said. We want to share technology, trade resources, explore the galaxy together, but as equals, not as subjects or protectors. And if we refuse, then you go home and explain to your leaders that you met with a species that conquered their own planet, survived everything the universe could throw at them, and just proved they can outfight the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Mitchell's voice remained calm, but her eyes were hard. And then you let them decide if they want humans as friends or competitors. After the formal negotiations ended, Ziegfeld found himself alone with President Mitchell in her private office. The walls were covered with pictures of human cities, colonies, and ships. But mixed among them were photos of families, children, and ordinary people living ordinary lives. May I ask you something? Zechthel said. Of course. During the war, I observed something that confused me. Your people seemed to enjoy fighting. They laughed in battle and joked while facing death. Why? Mitchell smiled. Because fighting for something you believe in isn't a burden. It's a privilege. Every human who died in that war chose to die. They could have surrendered, could have Run away could have hidden. Instead, they chose to stand and fight for their families, their homes, their future. She pointed to a photo of children playing in a park. Those kids will grow up free because adults chose to fight for their freedom. That's not a tragedy. That's the most beautiful thing humans are capable of. And now we build, we explore, we create. We become the species we were always meant to be. Mitchell looked out the window at the stars. We spent so long trying to be peaceful that we forgot what we were really capable of. The war reminded us. Zekthal left Earth with a treaty that would reshape the galaxy. But he also left with something more important, an understanding of what humanity really was. In his final journal entry, he wrote, "I came to study a primitive species and discovered instead what it means to be truly alive. The humans are not just another race of intelligent beings. They are something new in the galaxy, something that grows stronger under pressure, fights harder when cornered, and never stops reaching for the stars. They call themselves human, but I think they are something more. They are the fire that lights the darkness, the force that pushes back against entropy and despair. They are what the universe becomes when it refuses to surrender. And now that fire is spreading to the stars,